Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the Sentinel station, watching the massive alien vessel approach Earth. Her hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. After 200 years of searching the stars, humanity had finally found proof they were not alone. Now, looking at the enormous ship that dwarfed their largest space stations, Sarah wondered if finding them was a mistake. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way. It stretched for miles, covered in silver metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Thousands of smaller ships flew around it like birds circling a whale. The Valdros Imperium had arrived, and they had come in force. "Admiral, the Valdros delegation is ready to board," Lieutenant Marcus Hayes said behind her. His voice shook slightly. The young man had every right to be nervous. This was the most important moment in human history. Sarah turned away from the window and straightened her uniform. "Let's go meet our visitors." The docking bay was filled with Earth's best and brightest. Scientists, diplomats, military leaders, and representatives from every major nation stood in careful formation. They had argued for weeks about who would speak first, what to say, how to stand. In the end, they had settled on Secretary General Amara Okonkwo as the voice of humanity. The airlock hissed open. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The Valdros were humanoid, but only barely. They stood 8 feet tall with skin that shimmered between blue and purple. 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern dominated their faces. They wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid metal, flowing and changing color with each movement. The leader wore a crown of white crystal that floated above his head without any visible support. "I am Emperor Thexkar IX, divine ruler of the Valdros Imperium, Lord of 2,000 worlds, keeper of the eternal flame." His voice came from a translator device that made it sound like thunder rolling across mountains. "You are the humans of Earth." It was not a question. Secretary General Okonkwo stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Imperial Majesty, on behalf of humanity, welcome to Earth. We are honored by your presence. We have prepared—" "Yes, yes." The Emperor waved a long-fingered hand dismissively. "You have prepared gifts and speeches. You wish to show us what you have accomplished. Proceed." The words were polite, but the tone made Sarah's teeth clench. The Emperor sounded like a parent humoring a child who wanted to show off a crayon drawing. Over the next 3 hours, Earth's representatives presented everything they could think of. Dr. Robert Martinez explained humanity's scientific achievements. Professor Lin Wei spoke about human art, music, and literature. General Thomas Adeyemi demonstrated humanity's space exploration efforts. They showed the Emperor images of Earth's cities, its diversity, its history from cave paintings to space stations. Emperor Thexkar watched it all with what could only be described as mild amusement. His 4 eyes never widened in surprise or interest. He occasionally nodded like a teacher acknowledging a student's correct but unremarkable answer. When the presentations finished, Secretary General Okonkwo smiled hopefully. "Your Majesty, we hope this demonstrates that humanity is ready to join the galactic community as equals. We have much to offer and much to learn." The Emperor's mouth opened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp and too numerous. It took Sarah a moment to realize he was smiling. "Equals," he repeated, and then he laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, which somehow made it worse. It was the laugh of an adult who finds a child's innocent statement adorable. "Oh, little humans, you truly do not understand." He gestured, and one of his attendants brought forward a flat device. It glowed with soft blue light and displayed images that moved and changed. "This is a learning tablet we give to Valdros children at the age of 3 solar cycles. It contains the basic fundamentals of mathematics, physics, engineering, and biology." He held it out toward Secretary General Okonkwo. "I gift this to your species. Study it well. Perhaps in a few thousand years you will begin to approach the level of civilization." The silence in the docking bay was absolute. Sarah felt hot anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still. "Your Majesty," Okonkwo said carefully, "we do not understand." "Are you saying—" "I am saying that you are children, Secretary General. Impressive children, yes. You have reached space travel using primitive fusion drives in only 10,000 years of civilization. That is remarkable for such a young species." The Emperor's tone was genuinely complimentary, which made his next words cut deeper. "But the Valdros Imperium has stood for 50,000 of your years. We have uplifted 47 species from primitive states to civilization. We have seen thousands of worlds and billions of lives. You are the youngest children we have ever encountered. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, unable to contain himself. With respect, Your Majesty, humanity has achieved fusion power? We achieved that 60,000 years ago. Artificial intelligence? 42,000 years ago. Your proudest achievement is our ancient history. The Emperor was not angry, just stating facts. You have potential, humans. Great potential. But you are not ready to stand beside the established species of the galaxy. Then what are you proposing? General Adeyemi asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. The Valdros Imperium extends an offer to humanity. We will take Earth and all human colonies under our protection. You will become a protectorate species. We will guide you, teach you, and protect you from the dangers of the galaxy that you are not yet equipped to face. And in return? Sarah heard herself asking. The Emperor's 4 eyes focused on her. In return, you will follow Imperium law. You will contribute resources to the greater good. You will not build military vessels or engage in independent diplomacy with other species. You will learn and grow under our guidance until such time as you are deemed ready for full membership in the Imperium. How long would that take? Okonkwo asked quietly. 3,000 to 5,000 years, typically. Though given your enthusiasm, perhaps only 2,000 for humanity. The number hit like a physical blow. 2,000 years of being treated as children. 2,000 years of submission. And if we refuse? General Adeyemi's hand had moved unconsciously toward where his sidearm would normally be. For the first time, the Emperor's expression hardened. Then you will be classified as an unguided species. The Imperium cannot allow dangerous children to play with weapons they do not understand. We would be forced to implement corrective measures. He paused. I have seen the records of your world wars, General. Millions dead from weapons you barely understood. Nuclear fire used against your own kind. You are a danger to yourselves. We cannot allow you to become a danger to others. So we submit or you attack us, Sarah said flatly. We prefer to think of it as accept guidance or be guided. The Emperor's smile returned. But yes, Admiral Chen, that is the essence of it. The Imperium has maintained peace and order for 50,000 years. We did not achieve that by allowing chaos to flourish. Secretary General Okonkwo looked at the other human leaders. Sarah saw the same expression on every face, rage, humiliation, and helplessness. What could they do? The Sentinel Station's sensors had counted over 3,000 Valdros warships in orbit around Earth. Each one was larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. Your Majesty, Okonkwo said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor Sarah knew she must be feeling. Humanity accepts your generous offer of protection. The words tasted like ash in Sarah's mouth. She saw General Adeyemi's jaw clench. Dr. Martinez looked like he might be sick. Excellent. The Emperor clapped his hands together. You have made a wise choice. Tomorrow we will begin the integration process. Valdros advisors will be assigned to each of your worlds. We will establish resource collection schedules and educational programs. Do not worry, little humans. Under our guidance you will flourish. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. It is customary for protectorate species to show respect to the Imperium. When addressing Valdros officials, it is appropriate to bow. Like this. He demonstrated a deep bow, his body folding almost in half. The silence stretched. Sarah felt every eye in the room turned toward the human leaders. Secretary General Okonkwo's hand shook as she bowed. One by one, every human in the docking bay bowed to the Emperor. Sarah Chen bowed last. As she did, she made a promise to herself. This humiliation would not stand forever. Humanity had not climbed from caves to stars by accepting defeat. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. The Valdros thought humanity was young and naive. They thought 2,000 years of submission was acceptable. They thought they could pat humanity on the head and expect gratitude. They were about to learn that Earth's children had teeth. As the Emperor and his delegation left the station, Sarah caught General Adeyemi's eye. He gave her the smallest nod. Dr. Martinez's expression had shifted from despair to cold calculation. Even Secretary General Okonkwo's shoulders were set with determination rather than defeat. The Valdros had won this day. They had humiliated humanity before they had even truly met them. They had reduced Earth's proudest achievements to children's playthings. But they had also made a critical mistake. They had assumed that because humanity was young, they would stay submissive. They had forgotten that young species still remembered how to fight for survival. They had forgotten that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who accepts defeat gracefully. Sarah Chen returned to the observation window and watched the Valdros fleet surrounding her world. 2,000 years, the Emperor had said. 2,000 years of bowing and submission. She smiled coldly at her reflection in the glass. We'll see about that. Behind her, Lieutenant Hayes approached nervously. Admiral? What do we do now? Sarah turned to face him. Around them, the other human leaders were gathering, their faces grim but determined. Now, Sarah said quietly. Now we bow, we smile. We accept their gifts and their guidance, her voice hardened. And we prepare. Because one day that Emperor is going to regret he ever humiliated Earth. The others nodded in agreement. The Valdros Imperium had just made humanity an offer they couldn't refuse, but they had also just made the worst enemy they could imagine. They had united every human under one purpose, prove them wrong. The age of submission had begun, but it would not last forever. Of that Sarah Chen was absolutely certain. 8 years had passed since the Emperor's arrival, and Admiral Sarah Chen sat in a small apartment on Mars Colony, instead of a military command center. The Valdros called it early retirement. She called it being put in a cage where she couldn't cause trouble. The view from her window showed the red Martian landscape, dotted with domes and structures that humanity had built with their own hands. But now, towering above them all was a massive Valdros administrative center, its silver spires making Earth's achievements look small and insignificant. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. Sarah checked the security camera, then disabled 3 different monitoring systems she knew the Valdros had installed. The device that did it was human-made, cobbled together from spare parts. The Valdros never imagined that the primitive humans would figure out their surveillance technology so quickly. Dr. Marcus Webb slipped inside, carrying a bag that supposedly contained groceries. Sarah had known Marcus for 15 years, ever since he had studied alien context scenarios that everyone thought were fantasy. Now he was the leading expert on the Valdros, though his official job was teaching basic engineering to human students under Valdros supervision. Tell me something good. Marcus, Sarah said, pouring them both coffee. Real coffee was getting rare since the Valdros had decided Earth's coffee beans would be better used as a luxury export to other Imperium worlds. Marcus pulled out a data pad from his bag and set it on the table. I've been studying the Valdros for 8 years now. Every interaction, every piece of technology they've let us see, every history lesson they've taught us. He paused. Sarah, they're stagnant. What do you mean? The Valdros haven't innovated in 10,000 years. Maybe longer. Everything they use, from their ships to their weapons to their computers, is just refined versions of technology they invented ages ago. They're not creating anything new. They're just making old things slightly better. Sarah leaned forward. Are you sure? Completely. I've compared records from their historical databases. Their newest warship design is 8,000 years old. They've made it more efficient, yes, but the core design hasn't changed. Their AI systems? 42,000 years old. They're running the galaxy on ancient technology that they've just polished to perfection. But they're still stronger than us, Sarah said. Yes, because they have numbers and time. They've had thousands of years to build their fleets and perfect their systems. But Sarah, they're not better at innovation than us. They're worse. They've forgotten how to truly create because they haven't had to for thousands of years. Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time in years. What about their military tactics? Marcus smiled. That's even better. Or worse, from their perspective. The Valdros fight the same way they've fought for 50,000 years. Overwhelming numbers, superior technology, formal fleet battles. They line up their ships and fire until the enemy surrenders. It works because they've always had the bigger, better fleet. They've never had to adapt, Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning. Exactly. They conquered most of their empire tens of thousands of years ago. Since then, they've only fought minor rebellions that they crushed with sheer force. They don't know guerrilla warfare. They don't understand asymmetric combat. They've never faced an enemy that refuses to fight fair. Before Sarah could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Captain James Morrison, still wearing his Earth Defense Force uniform even though the EDF technically no longer existed. The Valdros had disbanded Earth's military within the first year, claiming humanity didn't need weapons under the Imperium's protection. James looked exhausted. He had just returned from the Kryn War, a conflict on the far edge of the galaxy where the Valdros were fighting an enemy species called the Kryn Horde. How bad? Sarah asked, handing him coffee. James sat down heavily. 80,000 humans dead. 80,000, Sarah. We were labeled auxiliary expendables and sent in first every single battle. The Valdros waited behind us. Let us take the casualties, then swept in with their superior firepower to claim the victory. And Valdros casualties? Marcus asked quietly. 200. Total. For the entire war. James's hands shook with rage. They sent humans to die so they wouldn't risk their own people. We're not soldiers to them. We're shields. Expendable shields. Sarah felt cold fury settle in her chest. Tell me about the Kryn. They're tough. Stronger than humans physically. But their technology is about equal to ours. The Valdros beat them with numbers and better shields. But Sarah, the Kryn never surrendered. Even when they knew they would lose, they kept fighting. The Valdros had to kill almost every single Kryn soldier because they refused to give up. How did the Valdros react to that? Marcus asked. They were disturbed. I heard Valdros commanders saying the Kryn were unreasonably stubborn and illogically persistent. They couldn't understand why the Kryn didn't surrender when defeat was obvious. James smiled grimly, reminded me of humanity. Sarah stood and walked to her window. 8 years of humiliation. 8 years of bowing to Valdros administrators. 8 years of watching humanity's resources shipped off to other worlds while humans scraped by with less and less. But it wasn't just pride that hurt. Last year, the Valdros had decided that New Perth, a thriving human colony of 30,000 people, was in a location they wanted for a Valdros research station. They had given the colonists 3 days to evacuate, then demolished everything humans had built there. 30,000 people lost their homes so the Valdros could have slightly better real estate. When the New Perth colonists had protested, Valdros peacekeepers had arrested the leaders for disturbing Imperium harmony. Those leaders were still in prison somewhere. And now 80,000 human soldiers were dead. Thrown away like garbage. Marcus, how far has your network spread? Sarah asked. 40 human worlds? We have contacts on every major colony and most of the minor ones. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, politicians. People who are tired of bowing. James, how many of our people came back from the Kryn War angry? All of them. Every single survivor wants payback. They saw their friends die for nothing. They saw the Valdros laugh about acceptable losses while humans bled. Sarah turned to face them. Then it's time. Start reaching out to the network. Tell them to be ready. We're going to need weapons, ships, supplies, and most importantly, people who are willing to fight. Sarah, we can't beat them in a straight fight, Marcus warned. Their fleet is 100 times larger than anything we could build. Then we don't fight straight. We fight dirty. We fight smart. We fight the way humans have always fought when our backs are against the wall. Sarah's voice was hard as steel. The Valdros think we're children who need guidance. They're about to learn that Earth's children bite. Over the next months, messages spread across human space. Encrypted, hidden, and passed person to person, the word went out. Be ready, be patient. The time would come. But the time came sooner than expected, and from a direction no one anticipated. New Perth's relocated colonists had been moved to a mining world called New Australia. They obeyed Valdros rules. They worked hard. They caused no trouble, but they never forgot what had been taken from them. When the Valdros raised the resource tax from 40% to 55%, claiming the Imperium needed more supplies for another war, New Australia's population had enough. 10,000 people marched peacefully to the Valdros Administrative Center. They didn't carry weapons. They didn't make threats. They simply demanded to be heard. The Valdros administrator, a commander named Zelthor, looked at the crowd of humans from his balcony. He saw their signs, heard their chants, and felt something the Valdros rarely experienced: annoyance at having their authority questioned. This is an illegal gathering, Zelthor announced through speakers. Disperse immediately or face consequences. The crowd didn't disperse. They had lost their homes once. They had buried friends in the Kryn War. They had worked for 8 years under Valdros rule and watched their dignity stripped away piece by piece. They were done being pushed. We demand representation, someone shouted. We demand fair treatment, another voice called. The chant spread through the crowd. Fair treatment. Fair treatment. Fair treatment. Zelthor made a decision that would change everything. He called in Valdros peacekeepers and ordered them to disperse the crowd by force. The peacekeepers were soldiers, not riot police. They didn't have non-lethal weapons. They had plasma rifles designed to kill armored soldiers. When the crowd refused to move, the peacekeepers opened fire. 15,000 humans died in 30 minutes. Men, women, and children cut down by plasma fire. The Valdros killed them efficiently, methodically, and without hesitation. When Emperor Thexkar heard about the incident, he made a public statement that was broadcast across human space. "The events at New Australia were regrettable but necessary," he said, his four eyes showing no emotion. "Protectorate species must understand that Imperium law is absolute. Disobedience cannot be tolerated. These humans chose to ignore warnings and suffered the consequences of their choice. Let this be a lesson to all species under our protection. Order must be maintained." The message was clear: obey or die. But the Emperor had miscalculated. He thought fear would make humans obedient. He thought one brutal lesson would keep humanity in line for another 1,000 years. Instead, he had just shown every human in the galaxy exactly what Valdros protection meant. Sarah Chen watched the footage of New Australia's massacre in her apartment. Beside her, Marcus and James watched in silence. Around human space, billions of people watched the same footage and felt the same cold rage. "How many do we have?" Sarah asked quietly. James checked his datapad. At last count, 40,000 trained soldiers from the Kryn War. Another 100,000 with combat experience from Earth's old conflicts. 300,000 civilians with useful skills who volunteered. "But Sarah, we don't have ships. We don't have weapons that can match theirs." "Then we make them. We steal them. We improvise them." Sarah's voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with fury. "The Valdros think one massacre will teach us to obey. They're wrong. They just taught us that we have nothing left to lose." Marcus pulled up star charts showing human colonies. "If we do this, there's no going back. The Valdros will come for us with everything they have." "They're already killing us," James said flatly. "At least this way we die fighting." Sarah stood and looked at both of them. New Australia's people died begging for basic dignity. They died unarmed, asking only to be heard. "I will not let their deaths be meaningless." She activated her encrypted communication system. Across 40 human worlds, resistance leaders received the same message. Operation Prometheus is active. Strike everything. Strike everywhere. Make them bleed. The Valdros Imperium had ruled for 50,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and subjugated dozens of species. They had never, in all their history, faced a species that fought back after accepting protectorate status. They were about to learn that humanity was different. Humans didn't forget humiliation. They didn't forgive injustice. And they never ever stopped fighting. The war had begun. The attack came at midnight, coordinated across 12 human worlds simultaneously. The Valdros never saw it coming. On Mars, Captain James Morrison led a team of 200 former soldiers against the Valdros Administrative Center. They didn't have plasma rifles or energy shields. They had human weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and salvaged tech, explosives made from fertilizer, guns modified to fire armor-piercing rounds, drones equipped with cameras and crude missiles. "Remember," James said into his comm as his team moved through the darkness, "we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to hurt them." The Valdros peacekeepers guarding the center numbered 50 soldiers with advanced weapons and armor. By all military logic, they should have easily defeated the human attackers, but James didn't attack head-on. His teams hit from 6 different directions at once, using the dark Martian terrain for cover. They fired from buildings, from underground tunnels, from positions the Valdros sensors couldn't easily detect. When the Valdros concentrated fire on one position, that team retreated while another attacked from a different angle. The battle lasted 4 hours. When the sun rose, the Valdros Administrative Center was burning. 30 Valdros soldiers were dead. The remaining 20 had barricaded themselves inside, calling desperately for reinforcements. James's team had lost 80 people. But they had proven something crucial. Valdros soldiers could die. Across the galaxy, similar attacks succeeded and failed in equal measure. Some human teams managed to destroy Valdros installations and escape. Others were wiped out completely. But every single attack sent the same message. Humans were fighting back. The Valdros were shocked. In 50,000 years of Imperium history, no protectorate species had ever rebelled. Protectorate status was supposed to be peaceful. Subject species were supposed to be grateful for Valdros guidance. Commander Zelthor, the same Valdros who had ordered the New Australia massacre, was stationed on Europa when the human attacks began. He immediately called for military reinforcements and sent a message to Emperor Thexkar. Your Majesty, the humans are in rebellion. They attack our installations with primitive weapons and terrorist tactics. Request authorization to implement pacification protocols. The Emperor's response came within hours. Authorization granted. Crush this rebellion immediately. Make an example of the humans. Zelthor smiled. Pacification protocols meant total war. It meant burning human cities until the survivors begged for mercy. It meant showing the entire galaxy what happened when you defied the Imperium. He deployed 3 full battle fleets to human space, 1,500 warships, each one capable of glassing a planet from orbit. It was, by Valdros standards, overwhelming force against an enemy with no space fleet. The first battle fleet arrived at Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Titan was home to 5 million humans and served as a major refueling station for ships traveling through the outer solar system. Admiral Sarah Chen was there waiting. All ships. This is Chen, remember the plan. We're not trying to win. We're trying to hurt them. The human defense fleet at Titan consisted of 43 ships. Most were converted cargo vessels and mining ships. Only 12 were actual military craft, left over from humanity's disbanded navy. Against 200 Valdros warships, it should have been a massacre lasting minutes. Sarah gave the order. All ships full burn. Ramming speed. The Valdros fleet commander, Admiral Crethor, watched the human ships accelerate toward his formation with confusion. Were they surrendering? Fleeing? Neither made sense given their trajectory. Then he understood, but too late. The human ships weren't trying to fight. They were missiles. Each one was loaded with volatile fuel and rigged to explode on impact. And each one had a crew of volunteers who knew they weren't coming home. Evasive action, Crethor ordered. But Valdros warships were built for power, not maneuverability. The first human ship slammed into a Valdros cruiser at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion was like a small star being born. It vaporized both ships instantly and damaged 3 others nearby. Then the second ship hit. And the third? And the fourth? 43 human ships died in suicide runs. They took 18 Valdros warships with them and damaged 30 more. In one battle, humanity had destroyed more Valdros military vessels than had been lost in the previous 1,000 years of Imperium warfare. Admiral Crethor stared at his damage reports in disbelief. His ships had been designed to fight other ships in formation, trading fire at long range. They had never been designed to fight an enemy that simply crashed into them like ancient battering rams. What kind of species does this? His second officer asked in shock. A desperate one, Crethor answered. But he was wrong. Humanity wasn't desperate. They were determined. There was a difference. The Valdros continued their assault, but they were now cautious. They knew humans would sacrifice themselves without hesitation. It made the Valdros, who had not faced existential war in thousands of years, uncomfortable. The next major battle happened at New Shanghai on Europa. The Valdros sent 20,000 peacekeepers to retake the city from human resistance forces. The humans had only 2,000 fighters. The Valdros commander, General Zelmar, had studied human military history during the voyage. He had read about human wars and their tactics. He thought he understood. He was wrong. New Shanghai was a city of tunnels and enclosed habitats beneath Europa's ice. The Valdros advanced in formation, using their superior armor and weapons to push through the outer defenses. They expected the humans to fall back, consolidate, and eventually surrender when their position became hopeless. Instead, the humans made every meter a nightmare. The tunnels were rigged with explosives that brought down entire sections on Valdros soldiers. Hidden firing positions let humans shoot and retreat before return fire could hit them. The lighting systems failed, plunging sections into darkness that favored humans with their better close combat skills. Chemical weapons made from industrial supplies filled corridors with choking gas. The Valdros had plasma rifles and energy shields, but they couldn't use heavy weapons without destroying the tunnels they needed to advance through. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not the crude bullets and explosives humans used. Their armor was advanced, but it didn't cover everything, and humans learned quickly where the weak points were. General Zelmar watched his casualty reports climb with growing horror. 100 dead, 300, 1,000, 5,000. They're everywhere and nowhere, one of his officers reported. We clear a section and they attack from behind us. We pursue them, and they vanish into tunnels we didn't know existed. Sir, they know this terrain better than we do. Then bring down the entire city, Zelmar ordered. Collapse the tunnels. Seal them in. But doing so meant losing the infrastructure the Valdros had come to secure. It meant admitting that 20,000 Valdros soldiers couldn't defeat 2,000 humans in urban combat. The siege lasted 6 weeks. By the end, 12,000 Valdros soldiers were dead or wounded. They had managed to secure only 1/3 of New Shanghai, and that only because the human defenders chose to retreat rather than be trapped. When General Zelmar finally reported to Emperor Thexkar, he had to admit something no Valdros commander had said in 10,000 years. Your Majesty, we cannot achieve victory without unacceptable casualties. The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed. Unacceptable? General, you command the finest military in the galaxy. The humans have no fleet, no advanced weapons, no training in modern warfare. How are they defeating you? They're not fighting by our rules, Your Majesty. They use terrorism, suicide attacks, and guerrilla warfare. They hide among civilians. They booby-trap everything. They refuse to surrender even when defeat is certain. Our soldiers are trained for honorable combat between military forces. The humans fight like animals. Emperor Thexkar felt something he had rarely experienced in his long life. Concern. Not fear, not yet, but concern that perhaps humanity was more dangerous than he had anticipated. Redirect 3 more battle fleets to human space, he ordered. And General? Next time I do not want excuses. I want results. But even as the Emperor gave his orders, more attacks were happening across human worlds. The Valdros were learning that occupying human territory was like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. The harder they squeezed, the more resistance slipped through their fingers. On Ganymede, a Valdros supply depot was destroyed by a team of engineers who had been pretending to repair Valdros equipment for years while actually learning how it worked. They knew exactly which systems to sabotage for maximum damage. On Ceres, human miners used their knowledge of the asteroid's tunnels to ambush Valdros patrols repeatedly. The Valdros would send 20 soldiers into the mines. 10 would come back. Then 5, then none. On Luna, Earth's moon, resistance fighters broadcast constant propaganda that the Valdros couldn't block. They showed footage of New Australia's massacre. They shared stories of human soldiers dying in the Kryn War while Valdros commanders watched safely from the rear. They reminded every human why they were fighting. Dr. Marcus Webb coordinated much of the intelligence gathering. He had spent 8 years studying Valdros systems, and now that knowledge was weaponized. He identified supply routes, communication relays, and weak points in Valdros defenses. They're predictable, Marcus told Sarah during a planning session. 50,000 years of the same tactics make them rigid. They can't adapt quickly. Every time we change our approach, it takes them weeks to respond. Sarah looked at the star map showing human space. Red markers showed where fighting was happening. There were dozens of them now, scattered across 12 worlds. We're hurting them, James said. But Sarah, we're losing people fast. At this rate, we'll run out of fighters before they run out of soldiers. Then we need to change the equation, Sarah replied. We need to make this cost them more than just soldiers. We need to make the Emperor himself feel the pain. How do we do that? Marcus asked. Sarah smiled coldly. By making him come to us. By making this personal. The Emperor humiliated us publicly. We need to return the favor. She activated the communication system and sent out a new message, not encrypted this time. She wanted the Valdros to see it. Emperor Thexkar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth. 8 years ago you came to our world and called us children. You gave us a toy for babies and told us to study hard. You made us bow before you. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today I have a message for you. We are done bowing. We are done accepting your guidance. We are done being humiliated. You wanted to teach us a lesson at New Australia. Congratulations, we learned it. We learned that your protection means nothing. We learned that your peace is built on fear. We learned that you care nothing for the species you claim to guide. Sarah's voice hardened. So here is our counter lesson, Emperor. We are humans. We are young, yes. We are primitive by your standards. But we are not weak. We are not afraid. And we are not going to stop fighting until every Valdros soldier is off our worlds and every human is free. She ended the transmission and looked at her team. Now we prepare. Because the Emperor is going to come for us with everything he has, and when he does, we're going to show him exactly what Earth's children can do. Across human space, the message spread. The rebellion was no longer scattered attacks. It was a declared war, and the galaxy was watching. Emperor Thexakar watched Sarah Chen's message 3 times. With each viewing, his 4 eyes narrowed further, and his usually calm demeanor cracked just slightly. "This human dares to address me directly," he said to his advisors. "This primitive child thinks she can threaten the Valdros Imperium." "Your Majesty," one of his military commanders ventured carefully, "the human resistance has proven more difficult than anticipated. Perhaps we should consider negotiation." "Negotiation?" The Emperor's voice was ice. "I do not negotiate with children throwing tantrums. I discipline them." He stood from his throne, his robes flowing like liquid metal. "Redirect 60% of our fleet to human space. I want every human world under complete military control. Cut off their communications. Restrict their movement. Show them what happens when they forget their place." "Your Majesty, that will leave our borders with the Kryn weakly defended," another advisor warned. "The Kryn are defeated. The humans are the problem now. To it." What the Emperor didn't know was that the Kryn were not defeated. They were simply waiting. And when the Valdros pulled their fleets from the border to crush humanity, the Kryn saw their opportunity and attacked with renewed fury. Across human space, the war escalated. The Valdros threw overwhelming force at every human colony. They blockaded planets, bombed resistance strongholds, and arrested thousands of suspected fighters. But for every resistance cell they destroyed, 2 more appeared. For every human they killed, 10 more joined the fight. The Valdros were learning a lesson that conquerors throughout history had learned too late. Occupying a territory is far harder than conquering it. Sarah Chen stood in a hidden command center deep beneath the surface of Mars. Around her, screens showed the status of the war across human space. The picture was grim. "Mars has lost 40% of its surface infrastructure," James reported. "We've evacuated most civilians to the deep tunnels, but we can't hold the surface much longer." "Titan is under full blockade," Marcus added. "No ships in or out. The Valdros are starving them into submission." "Ganymede fell yesterday," another officer said quietly. "The Valdros executed everyone they identified as resistance fighters. 2,000 people." Sarah felt each loss like a physical wound, but she couldn't let it show. Her people needed to believe they could win. "What about the Pandora Protocol?" she asked Marcus. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. 90% complete. We've hidden weapons platforms in debris fields and asteroids, even inside abandoned satellites. The Valdros sensors are too focused on active threats to notice dormant systems. When we activate them, they'll have weapons pointed at them from 1,000 directions they never suspected. And the Moon Project? Finished last week. The Valdros still think Luna is just a civilian colony with no strategic value. They have no idea we've spent the last year hollowing out the northern crater and installing the largest railgun ever built. Sarah nodded. The Pandora Protocol was humanity's secret weapon for 2 years, using resources stolen from the Valdros and technology reverse-engineered from their equipment. Humans had been placing weapons throughout the solar system, not large obvious installations that the Valdros would detect and destroy, but small, hidden and networked platforms that could wake up all at once. "How long until we're ready?" Sarah asked. "We can activate any time." "But Sarah, even with all this, we can't beat their fleet. We can hurt them badly, maybe even cripple them, but they'll still have superior numbers." "I know. That's why we need to make the Emperor commit everything to one final battle. We need to make him so angry that he stops thinking strategically and starts thinking emotionally." James understood immediately. "You want to bait him, not just bait him. I want to humiliate him the way he humiliated us. I want to make this personal." Over the next 3 months, Sarah coordinated a series of attacks designed not just to hurt the Valdros, but to embarrass them. Human fighters would ambush Valdros patrols, then broadcast footage of the battles across the galaxy. They made the mighty Valdros Empire look weak, confused, and unable to control one primitive species. The most damaging attack came when a team of human hackers, led by a brilliant programmer named Yuki Tanaka, infiltrated the Valdros communication network. They didn't just steal information. They broadcast a message across the entire Imperium to every world and every species. The message showed the truth about New Australia. It showed Valdros soldiers gunning down unarmed civilians. It showed children dying. It showed the Emperor's response, calling the massacre necessary. Then it showed human resistance fighters destroying Valdros installations. It showed Valdros soldiers retreating, It showed the supposedly invincible Imperium struggling against a species they had called children. The message ended with Sarah Chen speaking directly to the camera. To all the species under Valdros protection, we are humans of Earth. For 8 years we bowed to the Imperium. We accepted their guidance. We believed their promises of peace. Then they murdered 15,000 of our people for peacefully protesting. Now we fight, not because we are violent, but because we have no other choice. If the Valdros can do this to us, they can do it to you. The Emperor is not your protector. He is your jailer. The message couldn't be blocked or deleted. Yuki had embedded it in the Valdros network itself, set to replicate and rebroadcast automatically. Within days, every species in the Imperium had seen it. The effect was immediate. Small protests began on several protectorate worlds. Nothing major, nothing that threatened the Imperium directly, but whispers of discontent spread. Questions were asked. The myth of Valdros' invincibility was cracking. Emperor Thexkar was furious beyond reason. He had ruled for 300 years and never once had his authority been challenged like this. These humans, these primitive children, were making him look foolish before the entire galaxy. I want Sarah Chen dead, he told his military council. I want Earth burning. I want humanity to remember for the next 10,000 years what happens when you defy me. Your Majesty, one advisor said carefully. The humans seem to be concentrating their forces around Earth. Intelligence suggests they're planning a final stand there. It could be a trap. Of course it's a trap, the Emperor snapped. And we will spring it with such overwhelming force that it won't matter. How many ships can we deploy to Sol system? If we pull from all sectors, approximately 6,000 warships, Your Majesty. But that would leave many systems undefended. Do it. I will personally oversee humanity's destruction. I will stand on Earth's surface and watch it burn. The advisor hesitated. Your Majesty, is it wise for you to personally enter a combat zone? The Emperor's eyes blazed. I have ruled for 3 centuries. I have conquered 40 worlds personally. I will not hide from primitive humans who think they can challenge me. Prepare my flagship. We leave in 3 days. What the Emperor didn't know was that several of his advisors were already having doubts. The war with humanity was costing the Imperium dearly, not just in ships and soldiers, but in reputation. The Valdros had always ruled through perceived invincibility. But humans had proven they could be hurt. Worse, the Kryn had renewed their attacks, sensing weakness, and now other species were watching, wondering if they too could resist. On Mars, Sarah received word that the Emperor himself was coming. Marcus stood beside her, looking at the intelligence reports. He's bringing everything, Marcus said. 6,000 ships. 60% of the entire Valdros fleet. If we fail, Sarah, there's no second chance. They'll glass Earth and every human colony. If we don't try, we're already dead, Sarah replied. The Valdros will never stop hunting us now. Better to die fighting than live on our knees. James entered the command center. He had been coordinating the civilian evacuations from Earth. Billions of people had been moved to deep underground shelters or evacuated to the outer colonies. Mars is as ready as it's going to be, he reported. The civilian population has been moved to the deep shelters. We have 40,000 fighters ready to defend the underground sections. Surface defense is down to skeleton crews who know they're not coming back. Sarah nodded. Mars would fall. They all knew that. But Mars would make the Valdros pay for every meter. What about Earth? She asked. 3 billion people evacuated to underground facilities. Another 2 billion refused to leave. They want to see the battle, they say. They want to watch us fight. James smiled sadly. Stubborn species, aren't we? It's kept us alive this long, Sarah said. She looked at the star map one last time. The Valdros fleet was 3 days away. 3 days until the largest battle in human history. 3 days until they would either win their freedom or die trying. Send the activation codes to all Pandora platforms, Sarah ordered. Make sure every weapon system is ready. When the Valdros arrive, I want them to walk into a nightmare. Marcus pulled up the final calculations. The railgun on Luna is charged and ready. It has enough power for 1 shot. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. After that, it's done. 1 shot is all we need, Sarah said. Target the Emperor's flagship. If we can kill Thexkar, we cut the head off the snake. And if we miss? James asked. Then we fight until there's nothing left to fight with, Sarah answered. But we don't bow. Not ever again. Across human space, the word spread. The Valdros were coming in force. The Emperor himself would lead them. Earth would be the final battlefield. Some humans despaired. Some prayed. Some simply prepared to fight. In the deep tunnels of Mars, in the underground cities of Earth, in the hidden bases on dozens of moons and asteroids, humans made ready for war. They checked their weapons, said goodbye to loved ones, and steeled themselves for what was coming. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. By every logical calculation, they should surrender. But humanity had never been good at logic when it came to survival. They had climbed from caves to stars by being too stubborn to quit. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that should have destroyed them. The Valdros thought they were crushing a rebellion. They thought they were teaching primitive children a lesson about knowing their place. They were wrong. They weren't fighting a rebellion. They were fighting a species that had learned one crucial truth: better to die free than live in chains. The Emperor was coming to watch Earth burn. Instead, he was about to learn why young species were the most dangerous. They still remembered what it meant to fight for survival, and they had nothing left to lose. The Valdros fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system like a metal storm. 6,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of technology perfected over 50,000 years. At the center of the formation, larger than any other vessel, was the Emperor's flagship, the Eternal Judgment. Its hull was made of gleaming white metal, and it bristled with enough weapons to destroy a planet. Emperor Thexkar stood on his command deck, his 4 eyes surveying the primitive solar system before him. 8 small planets, a yellow sun, and somewhere among them, the species that had dared to challenge him. "Your Majesty, we are detecting the human defense fleet," his tactical officer reported. "Approximately 400 vessels, mostly converted civilian ships. They're forming a defensive line between us and Earth." The Emperor laughed. 400 ships against 6,000. Do they truly think they can stop us? Perhaps they hope to buy time for their population to evacuate, Your Majesty. There will be no evacuation. Order all ships to advance, destroy the human fleet, then proceed to Earth. I want to watch their planet burn from orbit. The Valdros fleet moved forward in perfect formation, exactly as they had done for thousands of years. It was the same formation that had won countless battles. It had never failed. That was its weakness. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the Valdros fleet advance from her command center deep beneath Mars. Every screen showed different angles, different sensors, different views of the same terrifying sight. The largest military force ever assembled, coming to destroy humanity. "They're moving just like Marcus predicted," she said calmly. "Tight formation, advancing in a straight line. They're not even scanning for hidden threats. Why would they?" James replied. "They've never had to worry about ambushes. They've always had the superior force." Sarah smiled coldly. "Activate Pandora Protocol. All platforms, all weapons. Light them up." Across the solar system, 3,000 hidden weapons platforms came to life. They had been disguised as debris, as dead satellites, as asteroids. Now they revealed their true nature. Railguns fired from hidden positions in the asteroid belt. Missiles launched from fake cargo containers floating in space. Laser batteries that had pretended to be mining equipment locked onto Valdros ships and opened fire. The Valdros fleet suddenly found itself being attacked from every direction at once. Their sensors, focused on the obvious human fleet ahead of them, hadn't detected the hidden platforms. Their shields, oriented forward, were vulnerable from the sides and rear. 200 Valdros ships died in the first 90 seconds. Explosions blossomed throughout their formation like deadly flowers. "Evasive action," Emperor Thexkar roared. "Find those weapons platforms and destroy them." But the platforms were small, mobile, and networked. When the Valdros targeted one, it would go dark while others opened fire. It was like fighting shadows. The human defense fleet, seeing the chaos, charged forward. They didn't try to match the Valdros in firepower. Instead, they used the confusion to get close where the larger Valdros ships couldn't maneuver effectively. "All ships follow attack pattern Delta," Sarah ordered. "Hit and run. Don't try to win. Just make them hurt." The human ships dove into the Valdros formation like sharks attacking a whale. They fired, then immediately changed direction before return fire could hit them. They used debris for cover. They coordinated in small groups, overwhelming individual Valdros ships before moving to the next target. It was chaos. It was messy. It was nothing like the organized warfare the Valdros practiced, and it was working. Status report. the Emperor demanded. "We've lost 400 ships, Your Majesty. Enemy casualties are approximately 100 vessels. But these weapons platforms, we can't pin them down. They're everywhere, 400 ships. In less than an hour, the humans had destroyed 400 Valdros warships. The Valdros hadn't lost that many ships in the past 1,000 years of warfare. Continue advancing, the Emperor ordered. Launch fighters. Clear out those platforms. And ready the main weapons. When we reach Earth, I want it reduced to rubble." The Valdros fleet pushed forward, taking casualties with every kilometer. Their fighters launched, seeking out the hidden platforms. They found some, destroyed them. But there were so many, scattered across such a vast area. Then Luna, Earth's moon, opened fire. The entire northern face of Luna had been converted into a single massive railgun, using stolen Valdros technology and human engineering. It had taken a year to build and had enough power for perhaps 2 shots. The first shot was perfect. A projectile the size of a small building, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance between Luna and the Valdros fleet in seconds. It hit a Valdros dreadnought and simply erased it from existence. The explosion was so massive it damaged 20 ships nearby. "What was that?" the Emperor shouted. "The moon, Your Majesty." "The moon is armed." Emperor Thexkar stared at the viewscreen in disbelief. The humans had turned their moon into a weapon. Their moon. The audacity was beyond anything he had imagined. "Target that moon and destroy it," he ordered. "Your Majesty, we're detecting another power surge." The second shot from Luna's railgun took longer to charge, but it was just as devastating. This time, the target was the Eternal Judgment itself. The shot hit the flagship's shields at full power. The shields held barely, but the entire ship shook like a toy in a child's hands. Systems failed throughout the vessel. The Emperor himself was thrown from his command throne. "Damage report," he demanded, pulling himself up. "Shields down to 30%, Your Majesty. That weapon has more power than anything we've encountered. If they fire again, then ensure we destroy it before they can. All ships focus fire on Earth's moon. I want it cracked open." 2,000 Valdros ships turned their weapons toward Luna. The moon lit up like a small sun as plasma fire and energy beams hammered its surface. Within minutes, the northern crater where the railgun was hidden collapsed. The weapon that had taken a year to build was destroyed, but it had done its job. It had forced the Valdros to waste time and ammunition on a static target. And every second they wasted was another second for humans to hurt them. The battle raged for 6 hours. Slowly, inevitably, the Valdros pushed through toward Earth. Their numbers were simply too great. The human defense fleet was down to less than 50 ships. The hidden weapons platforms were running out of ammunition or being destroyed, but the Valdros had paid a price. Nearly half their fleet was damaged or destroyed. Ships that had never seen real combat in thousands of years were burning wrecks drifting through space. Emperor Thexkar watched Earth grow larger on his view screen. The blue planet looked peaceful, innocent. He felt no mercy. "Prepare orbital bombardment," he ordered. "I want, Your Majesty." "We're detecting massive power signatures from Mars. The humans have weapons installations there too." The Emperor's patience snapped. "Enough. Send boarding parties to Mars. I want every human stronghold there eliminated. And launch the planetary assault on Earth. Reduce their major cities to ash." But there was one thing the Emperor hadn't planned for. One element that he had overlooked in his rage. Captain James Morrison and 200 human Special Forces soldiers had been waiting in a damaged freighter, floating dead in space among the debris of destroyed ships. When the Eternal Judgment passed close hunting for more hidden platforms, James gave the order. "Go, go, go." The freighter, which the Valdros sensors had dismissed as wreckage, suddenly fired maneuvering thrusters. It closed the distance to the flagship and magnetically clamped onto its hull. "We're attached," James reported. "Breaching now." They cut through the hull using plasma torches stolen from Valdros equipment. It took 30 minutes of tense work while the battle raged around them. Every second, James expected Valdros security to find them. But the flagship was so massive and the battle so chaotic that 200 humans in one small section went unnoticed. They breached into a maintenance corridor. Alarms immediately blared. "They know we're here," James said. "Fast and violent people. We're here for one target." They fought through the flagship like a surgical strike. The Valdros crew fought back, but they were administrators, technicians, and guards used to ceremonial duty. James's team were veterans of the Kryn War, survivors of 8 years of guerrilla fighting. and they were motivated by every human who had died under Valdros rule. The throne room was heavily guarded. 20 elite Valdros soldiers in advanced armor blocked the entrance. Grenades, James ordered. They didn't have Valdros energy grenades. They had human-made explosives packed with ball bearings. Primitive, yes, but devastating in the enclosed corridor. The Valdros guards fell, their armor pierced by hundreds of metal fragments. James kicked open the throne room doors. Emperor Thexkar stood from his throne, his 4 eyes wide with surprise. He had ruled for 3 centuries. He had conquered worlds. He had never expected humans to reach him here, in the heart of his flagship. "You dare," he said, his voice filled with outrage. "You dare to enter my presence as an equal." "I dare," James replied, raising his weapon. But the Emperor moved faster than expected. He was old, but he came from a warrior species that had conquered the galaxy. His hand reached for a ceremonial blade at his waist. "You wish to challenge me?" Thexkar asked. "Then let us follow the old ways. Single combat, you and me, human. If you win, I will order my fleet to withdraw. If I win, your species dies." James knew it was a trap. Knew the Emperor was probably a skilled fighter. Knew he might die, but he also knew this was being recorded. Knew every Valdros in the fleet was watching. Knew the galaxy was watching. "Accepted," James said, and put down his gun. The fight lasted 3 minutes. The Emperor was strong, fast, and trained in combat styles older than human civilization. But he had lived in a palace for 300 years. He had fought in ceremonies and rituals, not life-or-death struggles. James Morrison had learned to fight in the slums of Detroit, refined his skills in military special forces, and spent 8 years in actual combat. He knew every dirty trick, every weakness, every way to turn an opponent's strength against them. When the Emperor lunged with his blade, James caught the wrist, twisted, and broke it. When the Emperor tried to use his superior size, James went low, attacking joints and weak points. When the Emperor tried to wrestle, James used leverage and speed. The Emperor fell to his knees, his blade clattering across the floor. James stood over him, breathing hard, and picked up the blade. "You lose," James said. For the first time in his long life, Emperor Thexkar felt real fear. He waited for the killing blow. It didn't come. Instead, James activated his comm, broadcasting to the entire Valdros fleet. He made sure every camera in the throne room was capturing this. "I am Captain James Morrison of Earth. I have defeated your Emperor in single combat by your own traditions." He offered terms. "If I won, the fleet withdraws. If he won, humanity dies. I won." He looked down at the Emperor, who knelt before him, defeated and humiliated. "You came to our world 8 years ago and made us bow. You called us children. You gave us toys and told us to learn our place. You murdered 15,000 of our people for daring to ask for dignity. You threw 80,000 human soldiers into a war as expendable shields. You tried to break us." James's voice was hard as iron. "You failed. We are humans. We don't break. We adapt. We endure. We fight." He raised the Emperor's blade and pressed it against Thexkar's throat. The Emperor closed all 4 eyes, waiting for death. James lowered the blade. "I don't kill defeated enemies who can't fight back. That's the difference between us. Take your fleet and leave. If you ever come to human space again, we won't show mercy a second time." The Emperor stared at him in shock. In Valdros culture, defeated enemies were supposed to be killed or enslaved. Mercy was weakness, but mercy wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the strength to choose, even in victory. The Valdros fleet withdrew. Not all at once, but in groups, the ships turning away from Earth and retreating. Their Emperor had been defeated, humiliated, beaten by a primitive human. The invincible Valdros had lost. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. The Valdros Imperium. 50,000 years old, beaten by a species barely 8 years into space. Other species rose in rebellion. The Kryn horde pushed deeper into Valdros territory. Subject worlds demanded independence. The Imperium fractured as species after species broke away. Inspired by humanity's resistance, Emperor Thexkar was exiled. The Valdros Council of Elders, embarrassed by his failure, stripped him of his title and sent him to a remote agricultural world. He spent his remaining years working in fields under the supervision of human colonists, a fitting humiliation for one who had humiliated others. Earth was scarred. Mars was damaged. Luna was cracked and burning. Millions of humans had died, but they had won. They had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall if it forgot that young species still remembered how to survive. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the surface of Earth 6 months after the battle. The sky was still streaked with smoke from burning cities, but reconstruction had begun. Around her, representatives from 40 species gathered for the first meeting of what would become the Galactic Council of Free Peoples. "We didn't fight to build an empire," Sarah said to the assembled delegates. "We fought so no one could force us to bow ever again. Today we make that promise to every species here. No more empires. No more emperors. No more telling others they're not good enough to stand as equals." The council was formed that day. Not perfect, not without problems, but free. Species that had been subjects became partners. Dr. Marcus Webb visited the exiled emperor 1 year after the war. He found Thexkar working in a grain field, his once regal robes replaced with simple farming clothes. "Why?" the former emperor asked. "How did primitives defeat us?" Marcus sat on a fence rail and watched the sunset. "You ruled for 50,000 years. You had peace, prosperity, and power. You forgot what desperation feels like. You forgot what it means to fight for survival." He looked at Thexkar directly. "We spent 300,000 years learning to survive against impossible odds. Ice ages that should have killed us. Predators stronger than us. Diseases that wiped out whole populations. We learned to adapt, to cooperate, to refuse to quit even when logic said we should." Marcus stood to leave. "You thought we were children. You were right. But you forgot that young species are still hungry, still desperate. Still remember what it takes to survive. You had everything to lose. We had nothing left but our freedom. That made us dangerous." The former emperor watched Marcus walk away, finally understanding. The Valdros had been mighty, but they had been comfortable. Humanity had been weak, but they had been determined. In the end, determination had won. Earth rebuilt. The scars of war slowly faded. Children born after the war grew up in a galaxy where humans stood as equals, not subjects. They heard stories of the Great War, of Admiral Chen and Captain Morrison, of the Battle of Earth and the Emperor's fall. And they learned the lesson that the Valdros had forgotten. Never underestimate those who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Emperor had come to Earth expecting to watch it burn. Instead, he watched his empire crumble, because humanity had refused to bow. Instead, James activated his comm, broadcasting to the entire Valdros fleet. He made sure every camera in the throne room was capturing this. "I am Captain James Morrison of Earth. I have defeated your Emperor in single combat by your own traditions." He offered terms. "If I won, the fleet withdraws. If he won, humanity dies. I won." He looked down at the Emperor, who knelt before him, defeated and humiliated. "You came to our world 8 years ago and made us bow. You called us children. You gave us toys and told us to learn our place. You murdered 15,000 of our people for daring to ask for dignity. You threw 80,000 human soldiers into a war as expendable shields. You tried to break us." James's voice was hard as iron. "You failed. We are humans. We don't break. We adapt, we endure. We fight!" He raised the Emperor's blade and pressed it against Thexkar's throat. The Emperor closed all 4 eyes, waiting for death. James lowered the blade. "I don't kill defeated enemies who can't fight back. That's the difference between us. Take your fleet and leave. If you ever come to human space again, we won't show mercy a second time." The Emperor stared at him in shock. In Valdros culture, defeated enemies were supposed to be killed or enslaved. Mercy was weakness, but mercy wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the strength to choose, even in victory. The Valdros fleet withdrew. Not all at once, but in groups, the ships turning away from Earth and retreating. Their Emperor had been defeated, humiliated, beaten by a primitive human. The invincible Valdros had lost. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. The Valdros Imperium. 50,000 years old, beaten by a species barely 8 years into space. Other species rose in rebellion. The Kryn horde pushed deeper into Valdros territory. Subject worlds demanded independence. The Imperium fractured as species after species broke away. Inspired by humanity's resistance, Emperor Thexkar was exiled. The Valdros Council of Elders, embarrassed by his failure, stripped him of his title and sent him to a remote agricultural world. He spent his remaining years working in fields under the supervision of human colonists, a fitting humiliation for one who had humiliated others. Earth was scarred. Mars was damaged. Luna was cracked and burning. Millions of humans had died, but they had won. They had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall if it forgot that young species still remembered how to survive. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the surface of Earth 6 months after the battle. The sky was still streaked with smoke from burning cities, but reconstruction had begun. Around her, representatives from 40 species gathered for the first meeting of what would become the Galactic Council of Free Peoples. "We didn't fight to build an empire," Sarah said to the assembled delegates. "We fought so no one could force us to bow ever again. Today we make that promise to every species here. No more empires. No more emperors. No more telling others they're not good enough to stand as equals." The council was formed that day. Not perfect, not without problems, but free. Species that had been subjects became partners. Dr. Marcus Webb visited the exiled emperor 1 year after the war. He found Thexkar working in a grain field, his once regal robes replaced with simple farming clothes. "Why?" the former emperor asked. "How did primitives defeat us?" Marcus sat on a fence rail and watched the sunset. "You ruled for 50,000 years. You had peace, prosperity, and power. You forgot what desperation feels like. You forgot what it means to fight for survival." He looked at Thexkar directly. "We spent 300,000 years learning to survive against impossible odds. Ice ages that should have killed us. Predators stronger than us. Diseases that wiped out whole populations. We learned to adapt, to cooperate, to refuse to quit even when logic said we should." Marcus stood to leave. "You thought we were children. You were right. But you forgot that young species are still hungry, still desperate. Still remember what it takes to survive. You had everything to lose. We had nothing left but our freedom. That made us dangerous." The former emperor watched Marcus walk away, finally understanding. The Valdros had been mighty, but they had been comfortable. Humanity had been weak, but they had been determined. In the end, determination had won. Earth rebuilt. The scars of war slowly faded. Children born after the war grew up in a galaxy where humans stood as equals, not subjects. They heard stories of the Great War, of Admiral Chen and Captain Morrison, of the Battle of Earth and the Emperor's fall, and they learned the lesson that the Valdros had forgotten. Never underestimate those who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Emperor had come to Earth expecting to watch it burn. Instead, he watched his empire crumble, because humanity had refused to bow.